time now to look at the morning's papers. Afia Hagen and Thomas Cook join us to go through the stories. Afia and Thomas, good morning. Thanks a lot for joining us so early on a Saturday. So, let the battle begin, says The Guardian. Afia, it's started, hasn't it?
It certainly has. So Rishi Sunak threw his hat in the ring yesterday to become the new Prime Minister and leader of the Tory party. And it's thought there could be up to 15 runners and riders in the race to become the next Prime Minister. Now, Rishi Sunak's campaign video is very, very split indeed. I think we all know that he didn't roll that out in 24 hours. And actually, it transpires that his website, Ready for Rishi, the domain name is actually registered in December 2021. So it seems that Rishi has been ready for a while, but are we ready for Rishi? That is the question. Now, he has talked about how he won't be implementing any tax cuts, and I don't know how well that will go down with the Tory faithful. A lot of them saying, look, if we want a new leader, tax cuts are going to be something that's very attractive to us and something that's going to make us potentially want to vote for that person. He may turn that around as it gets closer to voting, closer to people deciding who the front two contenders are. We've also got Kemi Badenoch threw her hat into the ring last night as well. And I think there's a lot of power playing here as well. You know, people who perhaps realise realistically that they're not going to get the top job, the PM's job, but by throwing their hat in the ring, they are manoeuvring for top cabinet positions. So yes, it all begins.
Yeah, let's have a listen to that video. There it is now. We're watching it now. Thomas, Afia mentioned it there, the timeline. He obviously is, as you said, very slick. Do you think the timeline is going to be problematic? The fact that he resigned and suddenly we see this video coming out, or did everyone know he always had his sights on the top job?
I think since the day that Rishi Sunak was appointed Chancellor and the furlough scheme became a major, deal in British politics, everybody knew that Rishi Sunak was going to be setting himself up as the next Prime Minister. So in that sense, it's no surprise whatsoever. I recall at the time of the furlough scheme being unravelled, that people were chatting about how this was going to be Britain's next Prime Minister. So if anybody's now acting surprised that Rishi Sunak has some ambitions for the top job, well then certainly I don't know where they've been for the last year or so. The broader problem for Rishi Sunak, I think, when it comes to that timeline is one of, well, why did you stay in the government for so long? It presents him with a problem with giving some clear blue water between himself and his predecessor, Boris Johnson, if he remains into the cabinet until the very last minute. Indeed, the Daily Telegraph has some interesting insider details of how that resignation transpired. Apparently, Rishi Sunak went to see the Prime Minister. Boris Johnson demanded that he implement a cut in corporation tax, a popular hit, something that would go down well with the Conservative Party, the backbenchers. Rishi Sunak effectively did refuse to do so and walked out offering his resignation the very same afternoon. So it's fairly clear from that, that will be very much the campaign that he's launched for himself. He talked about in his campaign video trying to steer away from fairy stories that might comfort ourselves. Clearly a sort of barbed attack on some of those other Conservative leadership contenders who have either thrown their hat in the ring or look likely to do so, who are talking about fairly drastic tax cuts in order to grow the economy. He says that's not doable with inflation. Make sure, pin that in your mind. This issue of tax cuts / how to deal with cost of living is going to be a major issue in this leadership election, as is, I suppose, some of those issues that as recently as maybe 4 or 5 months ago made many of us consider the fact that Rishi Sunak might never become Prime Minister, stuff to do with his wife's non-dom tax status, and the fact that he is up there in terms of the wealthiest MPs in Parliament. All of these things are likely to appear in that leadership election. Afua said it just there. It's going to be jam-packed. The 1922 committee has a rule that you only actually need 5% support from the backbench Tory MPs. That's really quite a low threshold, actually. It's not terribly difficult to get 5% support. So, the names come in thick and fast. Some of the obvious candidates, some of the less obvious candidates. It's going to be a jam-packed race, probably as a consequence. Quite bloody, quite ruthless. You're starting to see some of that on the front pages already today. Prepare yourself for, I think a battle might be a mild way of putting it. I think a bloodbath might be slightly more accurate.
Yeah, we're expecting some more names coming out this weekend, aren't we, Afia?
Oh yes, absolutely. Lots of people, like Suella Braverman, potentially throwing her hat in the ring as well. And like you said, there could be up to 15 people in the race, and that's going to take quite a long time for the 1922 committee to whittle down to the front. To runners and riders as it were. But like I said, I think this is a lot of manoeuvring. There will be people who will be declaring their bid to run for prime ministership, but actually were just more about manoeuvring for a top job in the cabinet. I mean, there's whispers that Nadine Dorries might be contemplating a run as well, and who knows how popular these candidates will be. But I actually think it's good that we have such an open field, such a wide range of candidates, of people potentially lining up to be the Prime Minister. But like I said, it will be a tough job for the Tory party faithful, about 200,000 of them, to pick their leader.
Thomas, just going back to the Daily Telegraph, why are they calling Sunak the serious candidate?
Well, it's actually something that appears on the front page of the Times as well. So essentially, he's pitched himself as the person who's in the right position to make the right decisions. Again, perhaps a barbed attack at his predecessor, Boris Johnson. And it's essentially to do with that issue of tax. So his argument is that at a time when you've got soaring inflation, the right move is not to implement tax cuts, because essentially that would encourage more economic activity, and then that in turn encourages and stimulates further inflation. The argument that he's setting forward is essentially saying, listen, I'm the responsible one. We won't implement any tax cuts now. Let's deal with inflation, then let's grow the economy, and then let's get tax cuts in down the line.
Well, that appeal...
terribly well, the back benches remains to be seen.
Don't you need a low tax agenda, though, to appeal to the Conservative membership?
But this is exactly the problem that in many ways Boris Johnson faced, which is he's trying to navigate and balance these almost warring coalitions of voters that he himself constructed. So on one hand, Boris Johnson, for example, and Rishi Sunak as a major part of that government as Chancellor, talking a lot about levelling up, talking a lot about major new infrastructure projects, particularly in those red wall seats northeast of England. Big statism in many ways is what Boris Johnson became popular for in the 2019 election. Try balancing that with some of those more traditional Conservative seats, the likes of the recent by-election flipping over to the Lib Dems. These are seats where the kind of tax increases that are required for big state spending don't go down well. So essentially, in many ways, you can replace the guy at the top of the government with Rishi Sunak or whoever it's going to be, but the problems remain the same, which is how do you fund the projects that you're trying to promise, or are you going to get a radically new type of a government? Forget levelling up, forget the kind of statism and big government intervention that Boris Johnson became popular for, and move to a position where you're saying, actually, we want a low tax government, we want to cut taxes and use that to stimulate growth. The essential problems and dilemmas facing the new Tory the Prime Minister will be exactly the same ones facing Boris Johnson. Maybe the only thing you'll remove is some of these kind of personality questions that have plagued Boris Johnson over the last number of weeks and months.
Let's talk about Boris Johnson, because practically he is still in the job, isn't he? And he's told his caretaker cabinet there's no retreat on flagship policies. Having a look at the front of the Daily Express, that includes this policy of sending people to Rwanda, Afia.
That's right. So while all this leadership scrambling contest is going on, Boris Johnson is still the Prime Minister. And while he said he won't be making any big decisions, any new policies will be coming up in the next few months, he will maintain government policies that they are working on. And you rightly said that includes this plan to remove immigrants who arrive in the UK via boat. They flow across the channel, that those immigrants will still be planned to be removed to Rwanda. Now, there is a High Court ruling that's due on July the 19th, and it's thought that the government could try and get a flight out to Rwanda before then. So we could see in the next couple of weeks, in the next 10 days or so, and that you could have these immigrants who will be put on these planes and who will be removed to Rwanda in the coming weeks. And that's not the only government policy that the government are going to double down on, that are going to proceed with, but perhaps that is the most controversial one. And like I said, Boris Johnson stating that although he won't be making any big new plans, he is determined that government should go forward with this brand new cabinet with the plans that they already have. So we could see in the next 10 days, you could have these immigrants removed to Rwanda.
Okay, Thomas, I see you want to reply, but we're going to have to leave it till next hour because we've run out of time, but we'll get back to that and the policies around Boris Johnson and his caretaker cabinet. Afia and Thomas, thank you so much. We will see you next hour. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, we'll be taking another look at the runners and riders hoping to replace Boris Johnson.